Hello, everybody. We're about ready to get started in about 10 seconds. Just bear with us. All right. We're about ready to get started here. Wanted to show you the cover of this book. This is going to be the topic that we're going to be talking about, the subject of this book right here. Just wanted to show you as an audience over the next 8 to 10 weeks, we're going to be talking about this book you see here on the screen. There's two book covers here, and I highly recommend you get this book and read it if you're interested in what we're trying to accomplish with this show, The Church of Irresistible Influence. The cover on the left is the new cover. The one on the right is the original cover, but the content is exactly the same. So I just wanted to show that to you, and we'll get that out of the way. And by the way, I'm Dave.
I'm John.
And this is John. And John was with us a couple weeks ago. John is a pastor at, tell the name of your church, John.
Peaceful Valley Assembly of God in Maxwell.
And he also has a doctorate degree in ministry.
Ministry.
He has several degrees in theology and ministry. And go ahead and tell me a little bit about your background.
Background, my bachelor's degree is from Valley Forge Christian, which is now the University of Valley Forge. Go Patriots. And then my master's and my doctorates are both from Liberty University. One was done online, doctorates was done on campus, and if you got a way to go to get a master's, it's not a bad program.
Yeah. Well, John lives in Rupert, West Virginia, and he's a local boy. We're broadcasting here at Raymond Christian Center in Lewisburg. Pastor Farley's blessed us with some resources to be able to do that, and I want to give a shout out to him and thank him for this opportunity. Several years ago, Pastor had invited me when I first started attending Raymond Christian Center to be a part of this book study with the Church of Irresistible Influence. And I was, at this time, the Lord was dealing with me about unity in the church and connecting churches, and this was a very timely Bible study. And so I caught the vision. I went home, I studied the book, I broke it down, did a study on it myself, and began to try to communicate this to some folks. And at the time, I wasn't articulate enough to be able to make the connections and the influence with some of the folks in the community, because I saw our community, the possibilities of what the church could do inside each community if we would bind together with a common cause. So this book really is a great study.
Let me go to that meeting when I met you and you introduced this book to me.
Okay.
There was probably about 50, 60 people in that meeting, and everybody had their own agenda. They were all great opportunity things that needed to be done for the community. However, the problem was nobody wanted to work together.
Yeah.
And a dysfunctional church is reflective of a dysfunctional community. Now, I'm not saying we got bad communities, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is we need to learn to work in such a way where we can have an influence.
Yeah. And that means finding that common thread, that common bond that's going to actually bring us together so we can all accomplish what we have in our hearts. But sometimes we have to put that aside just a little bit to see the bigger picture and see how it fits in, and begin to realize that we need to support each other, work together on the most important things first. And so that common ground has to be found. And the common ground in this book was, for the church itself, was to be a bigger influence in the community by building bridges and finding real needs, get to the root of the problems and addressing those together. And it takes unity. It takes, me saying, John, what do you think? And then you listen to me and I tell you what I think. And we come together with the best decision for the whole. And we, what happens is, though, we go off and we build our own little silos sometimes. And we work on our own project and we want everybody to come help us, but we get so busy because we truly believe that it's the most important thing. And then we miss the big picture. So this book is an example of a pastor and a group of pastors in Little Rock and North Little Rock, Arkansas, that actually got God involved in it. And see, that's what happens sometimes. We think we get something from God and we go off with it, and we don't believe that maybe you got something from God too, and so got something from God, and we can come together with it and start piecing it together. But it takes unity, it takes prayer, it takes teamwork. It takes a lot of teamwork to do it.
Right, and without teamwork, We're just running around.
That's it. So we had another guest scheduled for this week, but couldn't make it. And I hate that. Maybe we can get him back on sometime. But
We'll try.
and we got a couple other folks that we're talking to from the community that share this vision, or at least leaning in this division into this vision. I've seen some comments and some different things on people's posts about unity and bringing denominations together, not to teach you our theology or make us all agree on every little thing or traditions and cultures sometimes, but really doing what Jesus told us to do, fulfill the Great Commission, and that was to go out and become fishers of men, bring them into the kingdom, and help let God restore their lives. So many times as a church, as an individual, and as a church, we take on so much responsibility and feel so obligated to help everybody with every problem that we get overwhelmed, and we back off and we become specialists in one area. And when that happens, we can work in that particular area, but when someone comes into our presence who has a need that we can't meet because we're not trained and specialized in that, we can't seem to help meet their needs. And that's what the body of Christ is for. The whole body is, if you got a particular ministry that's maybe not a main ministry in your church, and if you're connected with another church, we can send that person down there to help get those needs met without fear or reprisal of proselyting or losing members. And that's a big issue. What's your thoughts on that, John?
Well, I agree. I mean, a lot of pastors from small churches, they look at noses and nickels, or butts and bucks, whatever which way you want to go with it. But
what was that last one?
Butts and bucks.
Butts and bucks, and I hadn't heard that one. That's a good one.
Because they're a smaller church, they're limited on resources, and then so they try to offer as much as they can for as little as they have.
Yeah.
But if small churches could partner together,
mm-hmm.
this bridge building between churches brings out something. The body of Christ, we each have a particular element that we bring to the table, and we have to be reflective of each of us together. Now, in doing that, what we do is, if we can proclaim that Christ is the head of the church, then we're all serving the same head.
Yeah.
Which means we have to serve together. And a lot of us serve in the same communities. So in doing so, if someone's good at one area and someone's good at another, why can't we share people back and forth? We're not trying to devalue any one church.
Yeah.
We're trying to build the body of Christ as a corporate body, as opposed to a tag name of a church that you belong to.
Yeah. Well, the purpose of this show is to, get to the point where we're talking about solutions, ways that we can overcome these things, and we can talk about, and sometimes, it's really easy to get caught into identifying the problems, and there's plenty of problems out there. I mean, we can find them left and right, or sometimes our theology isn't 100% matched up, or our belief systems may be a little different. We may worship different. We may have a heart for a particular ministry that someone else doesn't have, and sometimes those things divide us, and we can get hung up on those, and then we begin to isolate ourselves, and we think we're right, and we begin to think other people are wrong. But a long time ago I learned that collaboration is so much different than cooperation. As a believer and as a church, we cooperate within our communities
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree, but to collaborate we have to aggressively work together toward a common goal. And we have to identify that goal, don't we? And this book really does a great job of talking about how to build a bridge into real needs. We can sit behind our walls and our pews and have our Sundays and Wednesday service, and every once in a while have a special meetings. But unless we're connected into our communities, we really don't know what those real needs are. People in the community struggle with things that I don't struggle with, and I don't have an understanding with that. But there may be a church or a group of people in another ministry, and you called those para-ministries, was it para-churches? That may have the resources and tools to help people in those areas. And if we're all connected, we know where those things are at, and we can aggressively work to help someone get their life reestablished and restored, in the church and for their family and for themselves. So that's the goal, is to connect believers. We're not here to institutionalize anyone or get anybody to change their philosophies or theologies. We're here to work on the main thing. I remember what Bob Proctor always used to say. He said, "Keep the main thing, the main thing." And sometimes we get sidetracked. We're doing an interesting study here at Raymond Christian Center for the past few weeks. It's a 6-week series called Go Fish. And it's an Andy Stanley study. And sometimes you get busy doing things. And this book right here was a great example of a church being equipped, but being equipped for what? Jesus didn't tell us, when he called us, that he was going to make us smarter, that he was going to make us wiser. He said, "Come follow me." He didn't say, "I'm going to make you richer." He didn't say, "I'm going to make you perfect." He said, "Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." And that's what he promised if we followed him, and that's what his whole goal was, to bring people to him. He said, "If I'm lifted up, and I'll draw all men to me." And that's what he's talking about. We bring them to Jesus. We introduce them to Jesus. And we can't always do that verbally. We can have and he talks about this in his book, about proclamation without demonstration. And, we can proclaim it all we want, but the world is watching to see if it's real. And if we love, we give of our time, we give of our resources. The world should see the church working together collectively. And this is one of the things that most atheists that I talk to, or people who are not sure there's even a God, will talk about, well, which church do I go to? There's so many. Which one's right? Why can't they all get along? Why is there so many different ones? And so the people on the outside are watching and looking on the inside, and they don't understand. So we have to form a front, not a front, but a bond. And the world has to see us working together. So that's why I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited. I've talked to some other people that are interested too, that is not is not ego driven, that they're not afraid that they're going to lose some members or lose some favor with their congregations because they're working with other groups.
So, when I did my doctoral work, I did it in an area of this. I took what Bob Lewis writes about, and I went a little bit further, kind of focused on Greenbrier County, but we could look at this in different counties or states, or if you're in the Northeast, your town, because those towns just run together up there.
Yeah.
And you want to find a pattern to get a solution.
Yeah.
In order to get a solution, you have to have relationships.
Yeah.
In order to build the relationships, you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and say, okay, what does the police department need? How can I help them?
Yeah. Great example.
What does the hospital need on how can I help them? You might find out that they might have a way to help you in your mission at your church.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't take the opportunity to go and say, hey, now I want to share a quick story. True story, you can look it up. It's about David Wilkerson.
Mm-hmm.
When he started Teen Challenge, he left a church in Pennsylvania and drove his car to New York City. Didn't have a place to live. The first place he started was in the courthouse. And that's where he met Nicky Cruz. And he offered Nicky Cruz to come talk to him. He talked to the judge about getting some of these criminals out and having an opportunity to change their lives. Mm-hmm. And when their lives started to change, Teen Challenge took off.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about going and starting a church as it was following a call to go meet a need.
Right.
Now you are serving in a community where you're called to serve. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a pastor or board member or just someone attending the church. You're called to serve.
Yeah. And this is the point you make is so powerful, because I started reading this little book called I Will. I think it's I could, I should, I want, I might, I will. And when we get down to it as an individual believer, we have to decide if we're going to actually do what God called us to do. And some of the objections that we come up with is, well, that's not my spiritual gift, or I'm an introvert and not an extrovert. That's not my calling. Or that's the pastor's job. That's what we pay the pastor and the staff for. But really, the leadership in the church is called to equip the saints or the believers for the work of the ministry. So everybody has a ministry. We have to discover, and it may not be pulpit ministry. It may not be anything really on the inside of the church other than giving of your time and resources, but it may be out in there where the needs really are. And sometimes with that relationship, like you talked about, sometimes we know people And God connects us with that person because He's given us a word, or He's taken us through and helped us overcome something, and we can share a word of encouragement. Sometimes it's just a matter of just saying, God loves you. I understand. That will open up that door for that person to receive Christ and begin the healing process and the growing process.
Yeah, and not to get off topic, but it actually ties right in. The church is known by its works. We're also known by the interaction we have because of the works that we do.
Yeah.
So, if you open a door for someone's got their grocery bags, hands full of grocery bags,
Mm-hmm.
you've just opened up an opportunity for them to thank you.
Yeah.
But you've also opened up the opportunity to build a little bit of a relationship, a rapport, where they ask, why do you do this?
Yeah.
It's because you choose to serve.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as stopping a kid from running in a road. Well, that's just normal society. We should be stopping any kid running in a road.
Yeah.
But what if that kid doesn't know that there's cars coming?
Yeah.
I mean, and mom freaks out.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the things that we do. We don't do it for glory or anything.
We do it because we serve.
Because we love to serve.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing about it. And years ago, God gave me a system called Focus, and it was really an acronym for a 21-part growth system. And it started out with foundation. Your beliefs, your what do you believe, and it works us all the way through FOCUS. And the final part of S was service. And through this process of understanding this model, you learn to grow, discover who you are, what you were designed to do. You discover your gifts, your talents, your passions, and all those things that God put inside of each one of us, every human being, and it's all designed to serve. So when we grow, we become better servants. The better we serve, the better our lives become, the more rewarding it becomes. And we all serve. When we go to work, I worked for a corporation for 36 years. I was there to serve. No matter what capacity I was in, it was my job to serve always to serve the customer, always to serve the company I worked for, and to serve those that I led and those that I followed. So it doesn't matter what role we're in, we're called to serve. And if we can do that with the mindset as a Christian, we'll find those opportunities more and more. We'll see them. And that's what it's about. But connecting with you and connecting with Joe and Bill and Susie, who all have the same mindset, we can make a bigger difference in our community because we can rely on each other. I don't have what John has. And I can say, well, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. We can get you that help because we have a network. And that's what it's about, having that church network. And that's what this book's about. We're going to go through this series. I don't want to jump ahead too far, but we'll get into that. John, why don't you briefly describe, a little bit about what this author's passions were, reason he really wrote this book.
So going through the book, I found 4 really strong passions. 1, strong, effective congregations. Now, think with me. If you're a pastor or if you're a board leader, an effective congregation is a congregation willing to follow the vision of the church. If you're following the vision, you will complete the mission. Next, the second one, people to find fulfillment by going from proclamation to demonstration. Now, in science, you always learned about potential energy. Everyone has the potential. Well, that's the same thing about proclamation. Everyone has one. But proclamations don't mean anything until it's demonstrated in action. So in science, we'd call that kinetic energy. Mm-hmm. Energy being used and expelled. So people, they will understand the proclamation, but until you lead them to demonstrate, which involves action, can we start to do that?
Let me stop you just for a second. He really talked about, his church being equipped. For several years they were, they kind of pulled themselves out of the mainstream type church, and they wanted something better and something different. They really wanted to see an impact. And so they began their process of developing ministries and inside the church, and they were growing people through a system, and they were all equipped. And they knew what to do, but they didn't really have that outlet. And they wanted to go from that proclamation to the demonstration to the world, because the church, everybody inside the church was doing pretty good. They were connected, they were loving each other, they were equipped. But one of the chapters was equipped for what? What are we going to do next? So they had to move to demonstration.
All right, so number 3, cities being transformed. Do you want to see your city be better? Well, let me just put in context of Greenbrier County. We've got a drug problem. And everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
It's been on national news. Now, we want to see that changed. Problem is going in and providing all these drug treatment things is just recycling the problem. We're not addressing the needs that children have. We're not addressing the needs that the spouses are having, or maybe the employer, or the fellow employees. We're just enabling them to go again because we're teaching them it's repetitive. So if we want to be transformed, the solution isn't to focus on trying to get this person off for a couple of weeks. The focus is to get them off completely, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But what about all the other problems? Those problems, when the person sees that he's causing or she's causing problems with their children and they understand, they're more willing to change.
Yeah.
When they see that they're part of the root of the issue, they don't want that because they feel guilt.
Yeah.
And then they want to change. And that's usually when they seek help. But still, we need to go further than that. We need to continue to give support to the children of drug abuse, because if we don't, they're likely going to fall into the same traps.
That's good.
And number 4, message and messenger to be true. If the message is true and the messenger genuinely believes what he's communicating is
Mm-hmm.
true, or she, people are going to believe him. I can read a story here and tell you got to do this, like the little engine that could.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean anything if I don't enact on it.
Yeah.
So message sending is listening and receiving, but it's also action.
Yeah.
It's also doing, because people want to listen with their eyes. They want to observe to see what people are doing to exemplify what they're.
Yeah, they want to see some models and want to see it in demonstrations. Like, don't tell me you love me, show me you love me. And this is where, as a church, as an individual church, as a church, as the church as a whole, we've got to change our mindset. Whether we want to believe it or not, the traditional church is dying. Opening up the doors and asking the community to come in is not working the way it used to do. Now, that may change. That may change in the future. But for right now, the church has got to get outside those 4 walls and actually show that they love people without condemning them, without judging them. We don't have to agree with lifestyles. We don't have to agree with things that's going on in the world. But we have to go out there and love them where they're at, because they need the love first. We can talk to them. But see, I was a sinner once. I was a churchgoer who wasn't saved. And I would look at the church and I think, this is so hypocritical. We talk about being good and doing good things, but we get inside these 4 walls and we just come in here to have a social media club, and we actually don't really love the world. We preached against the world. And so people live in that world, and they're living in those situations, and they feel judged and condemned when we have that self-righteous attitude. So we have to lose our self-righteous attitude and realize good people don't go to heaven. Saved people go to heaven. And the world has to know that. It's not about being good, because someone in the world is going to see fault in me. But I want to grow and learn to love more, so that I don't judge, that I love like Christ did, without reservation. And so they know that love's real, then they come to church. But they have to see it. So the messenger has to be true. If the message is, it's not about your good works, it's not about being perfect, it's about receiving Jesus Christ and His forgiveness and His love saves you, then they have to see it in me. They have to see it in you. They have to see it in the church. So we got to change our mindset. And that's a powerful statement that I heard just recently. I thought, I've never heard it said that way. Good people don't go to heaven. Saved people go to heaven. God is what makes us good. With all of our flaws, with all of our cracks and leaks in this body that we've got, we screw up all the time. He still loves us through it.
And you know what? You said saved people.
Yeah.
I'm going to sound like I'm going off the deep end here. But that means we're going to have Presbyterians, Lutherans, Catholics, Pentecostals, Baptists, and people from other spectrums within Christianity that truly love God, that accepted Jesus Christ as the personal Lord and Savior, going to heaven.
Yeah.
That means that's the body of Christ.
It is. It doesn't matter what the name on the door is that you go to. It's about the name on your heart. And if it's Jesus Christ, we're all brothers and sisters, and we're called to love each other. You know, actually, we can get into this in another teaching, but you know, Christ lives in you. He lives in me. His Spirit lives there.
So let me ask the burning question here that they're probably thinking of. What does this have to do with being an irresistible influence and reflective with our 4 goals for the book?
Well, I'll tell you from my perspective is, I love you. I have to practice love with you. Sometimes it's not always easy because we're human. We're going to have things we're going to disagree on, but we have to realize that we have something common. That Jesus is our Savior. He's our big brother. We are brothers together, and despite all of our differences, we're going to work aggressively together to do what Jesus has called us to do, and that's to go into the world and find those that are lost, that need Him, and bring them to Him. And that's the whole thing. We're going to go fishing for Him, and to do that, sometimes we got to throw a little fishing line out. And I like some of the illustrations here about how they build bridges, and I think we touched on it last week about how they built a bridge across Niagara Falls, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But sometimes it's just a little string to get something started, so you have something to guide you across and something you can build upon to really build a strong bridge. So I hope I answered your question somewhat on there. Let's see if we got some questions here from Facebook. We do want to hear from you folks, so if you're viewing us and you're hearing what we're saying, you got something to say, jump in there. All right, Dale, how you doing? We got Rhea and Terry and Dale have joined us. Hello, everybody. I hope you're got some time to watch the show here. I got John with me, and we're really kind of getting into chapter 1 of this. So last week we're just kind of doing a quick review, and we talked about the 5 sections the book's lined up in. And the first one, which we're going to jump into today, is spanning the Great Divide. And this gives proof that there is a divide. There is a big chasm there. The church is sitting here. The people in the world are over here. We got to bridge across that chasm. Go get them. And mass evangelism has got a bad name in the past because of some leaders who weren't that great leaders. But we just had one just go to home be with the Lord, was Billy Graham, and I wouldn't even guess about how many people's lives he affected for the Lord. And those folks are in the world still here. Most of them are here, and they're in churches across the United States, across the world. Different churches, different denominations, but all brought to Christ through this one man's ministry. So that's some big shoes to fill for all of us. But collectively as a church, 33,200 different Christian denominations, we could do that. It's just like Jesus said. He says, greater things shall you do than I do. And you think, here's the Lord, creator of the universe, telling us that we're going to do greater things than He did. It's because He's called many of us to do it together. And that's what it's about. What's the second part, John?
Designing structure, reinventing the church. Now, I don't want you to think in terms of we're going to dismantle your church and rebuild it and tell you how to do church. That's not it. But the world has changed.
Yeah.
Our practices of ministry are still in the 1970s, 1980s for most churches.
Yeah.
Not knocking the ministry then, okay? But if we're going to reach the Z generation, the disconnected, communicatable generation, as the older group puts it, we have to learn to get on our phones, text them, and learn their emoji language. Trust me, I'm struggling with it because I don't quite pick it up with my daughters. Now, why is that important for me to reinventing the church? Because how I reach people, being able to communicate to them that Jesus loves them, is different today than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Let me share a little story with you about the same thing you're talking about, the texting. I came back from a training session in Roanoke one time with Cam Marston. He wrote the book, the What's in It for Me Workforce. And he was talking about millennials, talking about the different generations. And my daughter was about 14 or 15 at the time. She had her cell phone, and I had one too, but I didn't like doing the texting. I had the old flip style. I didn't even like to text. And he talked about how it was so different, and this generation is different, but they are who they are, and we can condemn them, we can judge them, we can put them down for what they do because it's different than us, but that's where they're at. They grew up in this world with that technology. And so he talked about it's our responsibility to get into their world. We want to get them into our world and tell them what to do, and they don't want to get into our world because that's where they're at in life. They're teenagers, they're young people, and Not that they're selfish, but they're growing and learning about the world, and that's just where they're at. I was trying to have a conversation with her. She's doing her homework. She had the computer open. She had an earbud in one ear, and had her cell phone up here, and she was texting her buddies while she was doing it. And I'm trying to have a conversation with her. I kept saying, Autumn, I need to talk to you for a minute. 3 or 4 times, and she just didn't hear me. So I walk out on the deck of my porch, and it took me a while, but I finally got a text in and said, Autumn, I need to talk to you. Within 10 seconds, she came to the door and said, what do you want, Dad? And we sat down, we had a discussion. And I had to text her to get her attention. Now, that's an extreme case, but that's reality.
It is.
If we can't communicate in their language, they're not going to come over and communicate in our language. We got to get into their world, walk in their shoes, hear where they're at, form that relationship like you talked about, so that we can actually have a meaningful conversation. But that means we got to sacrifice. We got to learn some things. Well, some folks may be saying, well, you mean I got to learn how to text? Well, if you want to talk to that kid who's texting, yeah, you're going to. You have to make some sacrifices and learn to get into their world. And the people who do have relationships with these children, they don't judge them, they don't condemn them, they understand them, because this is where they're at. That happens in every generation. It happened to our generation and the ones before. Someone had to take the time to step out of their world to get over to my world to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and when they did, it made me feel like I was valued and I could open up to that person. So that's a great example of, if you really want to be in your kids' lives, don't judge them because they're playing video games. Maybe you want to sit down and have play a video game with them to hear what they got to think and what they're saying, because that's where they're at. And we look back in our generation, we were the same. We were the same way.
That's when my kids will play Super Mario with me.
Yeah.
And I will try to play their games and I'm lost.
Yeah. I can't play them either, but I'll watch them play and talk with them. But that's just an example.
All right, so the third one, reviewing real quick, is experimenting with the results. Real life stories from the I2. Once again, I2 is irresistible influence. There, you're just kind of discovering on how we're going to do this. And I'm going to say right here, start small. Because if you start big and fail, you're not going to want to pick up. But if you start small, learn a lesson, when you do it again, you can fix it.
And that's smart goals. You know, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. You set a big goal, and then you do the little goals to build that momentum and that courage and that confidence, and then you start moving forward. So that's a great point, John.
All right, so number 4, expanding the I2 effort. And this is where we get into the community, and this is where I can't wait till we get there. I'm really excited about it, because partnerships with community groups, government and education, etc. You can fill in the blanks there with etc. Because guess what? They all need help.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're all looking for volunteers. And you know what? They're looking for people to lead volunteers. Guess what? It's a great opportunity. If someone's in your church doesn't feel connected to a ministry in your church, you can hook them up with an outside place where they can volunteer.
That's a great point, John. You know, I mean, you got so many social programs out there that are understaffed and undermanned with limited resources, and they're trying to help. They really are trying to make a difference, but they get overwhelmed. So what if the church came out and says, hey, I want to help you feed some of these folks. I want to help maybe with an after-school program with some of these children and be a mentor and a teacher. There's so many opportunities out there that we can move into individually and as a church to get involved and partner with this and be a real difference in our community, become that influence in the community.
And some of my friends that are that watched the video last week, some of them are firemen. Believe it or not, your fire department can help out volunteering in some of these other areas too. It's not just limited to church building this, because when you build across the bridges, it makes it easier for the community to trust everybody.
Yeah. You know, I've really, over the past few years, I've really noticed, you know, fire departments and fire rescue folks and police departments, they're a community. They have a community themselves. It's almost like a church community, the rescue community, and their family. And they're so loyal to each other. And sometimes I think, man, I wish the church had the connection and the loyalty that these folks have. And, you know, so when Christians get involved with that, it's not about the proselyting and winning to your church specifically. It's about just going and saying, I want to make a difference with you. and have a relationship with you. Because a lot of those folks are Christians, some of them are not, but they're still family. So that's a great way to make connections in your community.
And the fifth one's anticipating the future. Now, strategic planning would tell you you got to plan the future. And
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything I learned in strategic planning. The problem is, unless you're prophetic, you don't really know where to shoot the goal.
Yeah.
However, if you know where you want this movement to go to, when you get closer to the end, you're actually planning for the next goal to be attained. So that's where we start to anticipate the future. And guess what? You can only trust Jesus in trying to help those strategies.
Yeah, that's it. You got to follow the leader, and he does have an overall vision. He does have a vision. He's told us. He said, go and get the lost, bring them to him, love them, and love is the foundation for everything. And if we can learn to love, we got to practice it inside the churches. We got to practice from church to church, so that we can actually have a major influence with those who don't even know Jesus Christ yet or know much about the church. And with all the negative publicity and all the negative ideas about Christianity in some of these communities, there's no wonder that they do. A lot of times we'll protest and stand up for our rights, and we'll do these things in the community, and that's what they see on the media and the news, but they don't see the behind the scene things where people are being fed and people taken in and people being loved by the church. So we have to be more of an influence in our community, so people can see that it's real, not just for a front.
You mentioned a word, and we've used it a couple of times. If you've loved not, you have not.
Yeah.
You can't disciple or evangelize without loving.
Yeah.
And sorry for being soft there. I really want people to understand that if you're going to evangelize, you have to love.
Yeah.
You can't be condemning. They already know what they can and can't do. What they don't understand is, how can they love a God that loves them?
Yeah.
Who died for them? And that's where we start finding our purpose to serve. And we start to develop that. And it draws out in the book. It's kind of like an undertone theme. But think about it for a minute. Can you build a bridge that will sustain without love to the community?
No, and it can't. Jesus did something 2,000 years ago that has stayed. He sacrificed. He gave. He loved. And love comes with sacrifice. When we truly love, we sacrifice. And it may be God calling you to a mission field. It might be just going down and working in a soup kitchen somewhere. It may be joining your local fire department. Or maybe going down to the hospital and become a volunteer to make someone's day better or brighter. There's so many opportunities to serve and love, but it has to be demonstrated, and that goes right back to from proclamation to demonstration. I'd rather someone show me they love me than tell me they love me. And you can tell me you love me and then turn around and not help me, and what you're not really being honest. So help us. It comes with sacrifice. All right, so to move on, he talks about some challenges in this book, and the first one is, of course, we're talking about is connecting the community and its needs with our requirements as a church. The community has needs. It's not always about evangelizing and preaching on the street corner. It's about finding those needs and going in. Zacchaeus, was it Zacchaeus, the tax collector, that found Jesus and
Nicodemus.
Nicodemus, yeah, and Jesus went to his house, didn't he?
Had dinner with him.
Had dinner with him, man. Here was a guy that everybody thought was a crook. He was pretty crooked, and I thought he was a thief, and he was a thief. But when he came in contact with the love of Jesus, he didn't judge him. He went and broke bread with him and talked to him, and he repented, and he turned his life over to God. So the Bible's so full of those about Jesus' encounters with people who were in conditions that we can point our fingers at today and say, that's wrong. That person shouldn't be even going to church in our church. They shouldn't even be. They need to sit on the back row. And I've been places where people had judged people that were in bad conditions and wouldn't even let them sit in the front row or anywhere. They'd sit them in the back row. And that's religion. But Jesus loved them. The lady who was caught in adultery. What did he say? He said,
You're forgiven.
He said, "You're forgiven." He said, "No, go on, don't do it anymore." But before he even said that, he told everybody that was standing around him that had a rock in their hand, because the penalty was death. They stoned people for that. He said, "Those without sin cast the first stone." And slowly, each one of them had to drop their stone, because they all knew that they had some sin in their lives, that they didn't have a right to judge her anymore. So we have to realize that we can't judge the world. We're in the world, and we may not be of the world, because we got a different set of goals and principles, but we live here, and we're to be an influence, salt and light in the world.
Yep.
So it also asks a question, John. What's the question?
Is my community thankful for our church? Now, that's a powerful question.
It really is.
Some small churches, you're probably scratching your head going, "Oh my goodness, I don't know," but that's fine. Relax, breathe in. Do you do anything for your community? Last year, my church was able to give shoes through a grant that was funded by an organization that doesn't believe in church. But the goal was to get kids shoes. We just happened to be an outlet that was able to provide the shoes because of this grant to a local elementary school.
Yeah.
And my church, small church, counting all the kids, if everyone shows up, about 21 people, guess what? They had a blast with it, and everybody in the church was involved, from taking it out and inventorying everything and making sure they all sizes matched, and making sure we counted them out, and then come up and we had a pair wrong, and we had 2 pairs that were mismatched, and we had to go through them all and then recount them out. We had a blast.
Yeah.
And then we came back and wrapped presents for them at Christmas.
Yeah.
We connected. We were a small little church doing stuff that we think is meaningless for people, but it has a great impact. And it's been a year later, and guess what? I still see those kids wearing those shoes at Walmart, at ball games, and it makes me feel great that, hey, I was able to do something small and meet a need that I never knew existed.
Well, something you said there was pretty powerful too. You partnered with some organization that wasn't necessarily a Christian organization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been involved with leaders and in places where that was a no-no. We don't get involved with agencies that want to try to control what we're doing, because we don't want them telling us how to do this. And really, what bottom line is the people who on the other side who need these shoes are not going to get these shoes because we're too proud to allow someone else to get credit or influence our decisions on how we do it. The bottom line is somebody needed shoes. You were an outlet. You were a venue that people could feed the shoes through and get those shoes to those people.
Yeah.
We have to suck it up sometimes and say, this is bigger than me. I'm willing to bend some things here to get people's needs met. So that's powerful. All right, the next challenge is our thinking of just being in the church to being in the church, to working and ministering outside the church. We got things we got to do inside the church. We got to keep the building up. We need to be proud of our facilities. We need to try to make things as comfortable as we can. We can't focus on the comfort.
Someone's still got to clean the toilets.
Someone's got to do it, man.
Someone's got to vacuum the rugs. Yes, those are viable.
Someone's got to study the lessons and teach the lessons, and all those things got to go on. But we have to realize it's all for a bigger purpose. It's to equip people to minister on the outside, isn't it? We have to have that focus.
So let's look at the context of the New Testament church as it was between 50 and 90 AD if you're old school, CE if you're new school on your dating, okay?
Yeah.
And they didn't have buildings. They didn't have churches. A church would meet either at a small local park, or they would meet at someone's house. Paul would write a letter, and when they got, like at Galatia, when they got the letter wasn't meant for that little small group. It was meant to be circulated to the other guy leading to the other small group.
Yeah.
And they were to work together to start more small churches within Galatia.
Communities. That's what church is a community. They still had the temple in Jerusalem. They still went to the temple. They still did the ritualistic things. But church was about people gathered together in Jesus' name to edify and build each other up. And that's what church is about. So you make a great point there. The building's just the building. That's where we all come together to have all these things done together. We can do things together collectively. But it's not so we can just gather together.
So what we need to do is shift from, now, believe me, I got nothing wrong with having church building and
Yeah.
having a common
I'd rather
place
be inside of a building than sitting under a tree
Same
somewhere
here,
when it's raining.
especially in West Virginia.
Yeah.
It's April 16th. We're getting snow again.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the building isn't meant to be the institution. The institution's meant to be the people going out and reaching the lost.
Yeah. I heard this term before. We're not an organization. We're an organism.
Organism. Yep.
We're a living, breathing organism that the collective body of Christ is made up of people. It's not about the buildings, not about the organizations that we function under sometimes. And sometimes we misunderstand that. And what's the next challenge, John?
The challenge is the fact that most of our church has become preoccupied with itself.
That's powerful. And you'll see evidence of this thing when you start to see people get dissatisfied. They start to get critical. They start to judge. Well, if I was leading, that's what I would do. I don't think they ought to do that. You can hear those conversations taking off. You can start to realize something's off. We're off mission because people get dissatisfied and they start to leave. And they get bitter and they move out. And and you can sit and watching your business meetings. If you have a meeting where you talk about things and you see people who are being critical about every decision you make, that's a bad sign. If we can't find people who say, let's move forward. We got people out there who's waiting to hear about Jesus, to see Jesus in action. If we're not having those kind of conversations in our meetings, they start to get critical because we've lost our focus. We've become inward focused. That's about my needs, my likes, and my wants. When we start arguing about the color of the carpet, I don't like the sound, the noise is too loud. When we start to complain, we're not focused on the big goal. And that's what happens every time. In the church, it happens in business, it happens in families.
Let's talk about the big goal. Because when I first came to West Virginia, one of my board members came to me. And I expect you to have 40 hours in the office. Be at church Sunday morning. I want you to start Sunday evening church. I want you to have Wednesday night church. And I need you to make sure you're doing evident of 20 hours of discipleship of people in the church, and then 40 hours outside the church doing evangelism. When you add that all up, I only had 2 hours in a week to sleep. Not even to see my family.
Yeah.
And I looked at the guy and told him how unrealistic his thing was. And his thing was the pastor was supposed to do everything for the church.
Yeah.
And that his job was just to come and sit there and smile. And that's exactly what he said. And I said, well, if you're here to sit and smile, then you're going to be uncomfortable because I'm going to start asking you to do stuff.
Yeah.
It's not a one-man show.
Yeah.
We're an organism. We got to work together.
That's right.
We're
You're there to equip them to do the work
to
of the ministry.
do the work.
That's why you're trained. That's why you're educated. That's why you spend time in the Word. That's why you're in prayer. Because the flock that you're leading have to go outside the walls and do the work. And if they're not getting the right message, are they? So that's good. All right, you talked a little bit about shifting paradigms. I don't want to get into this too deep today, but really, it's about changing direction and methodology to apply the principles from this book. So when we talk about a paradigm shift, we're talking about traditional church the way we see it. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that understand what we're talking about. Some folks maybe don't have a clue what we're talking about. We're talking about what the church's responsibility is as a whole. And we're going to have different opinions, different views on that about how to do it. But really, it's all about the church being the salt and light in the world and about being an influence for good in the world. And so how do we go about that? We got different ways. The good thing about this book right here is this guy he wrote about their experience. Over 100 churches came together and worked together in this and changed those communities. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's about, shifting a paradigm so that we can get better results without giving up our truth and our foundation. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's just about shifting, coming back to that foundation and recentering on the Great Commission. So the process is to better enable us to fulfill the Great Commission. So the process of this book and the things that we're talking about, bridge building, is to actually help us fulfill that Great Commission.
Right, that's what it's focused on.
Yeah. John, you also mentioned that leaders need to be flexible, to work together on common ground issues, and to learn to build the right bridges to the people and their needs. You want to elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sure. Remember earlier today I talked about the drug problem.
Mm-hmm.
We've built bridges to the individual involved in drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Now we need to start learning at, okay, that's not quite working, but it is working.
Yeah.
1 out of every 5, I think, is coming out, if I remember the statistic correctly. So please
Okay.
don't quote me on that. But on the other hand, the kids, because they've seen the drugs, they've seen their parents take it, they need an outlet for it.
Yeah.
Little League Baseball is a great place for that, but sometimes they just need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be at school, but sometimes, most of the time, when these kids start feeling it, who are they going to talk to? Who can the parent call
Yeah.
and say, hey, this is one of the problems that I'm looking at and trying to find solutions for, as a pastor for this county. But another issue that I'm noticing is a lot of our people don't have enough money to buy groceries.
I've seen that more and more.
And now that they're requiring drug testing for food stamps, it's going to get a little bit worse.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we equip? How can I help one of the other churches in Lewisburg that has a food bank? How can I help them? I don't have the financial resources to send them, but they're going to become overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll probably be the same thing on the West End. How can I help them? I might have a person I might be able to send and help them hand out groceries.
Well, and that's a great point, because if every church tries to have their own food bank, that's usually not a sustainable ministry. And what happens is it shuts down. We become discouraged, and each time we do that, we become more and more discouraged, and we sometimes just give up. Sometimes we quit and stay.
Yep.
We quit working, we quit hoping, we quit dreaming, and we just stay right where we're at. And so a sustainable ministry, a sustainable program, is one who has the talent, the place, the resources that's being fed by many places. So, I'm just giving an example, maybe 5% of offerings go to support that ministry. 5% goes to this ministry. If we had an outward source that we're giving into these ministries, and everybody gave a little bit of what they could give, then those ministries can be sustained. But when they have to beg and borrow and steal, not steal, but they have to work so hard just to get the resources to get to these people when the resources are already out there. Just we have to get channels. So it is about making those bridges to the sustainable ministries where maybe you're not equipped to run a food bank.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the great chasm, the great divide.
All right.
Chapter 1. And I love what Michael, I guess he pronounced his name Regal, says that the church's inward focus is a grave illness. And it is. When we start looking on the inside, trying to make it better for ourselves, better programs, better entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with having good stuff. I mean, and doing your best and trying to be excellent in what you do and what you represent. But if that becomes our main goal, we start looking on the inside, and the church is sick when that's our focus. So won't you tell us a little bit about the Niagara Bridge story, John, and the challenges that Mr. Roebling faced, and how it relates to the church today as it engages the task of building those bridges to our community.
They wanted to build a bridge from the United States to Canada. And they had all these engineers, and they kept saying it was impossible, it was impossible. And this one guy had an idea, what if we put a cable suspension bridge across? Because it is quite windy up there, and it'll allow the bridge to sway, so we wouldn't have to worry about the piers twisting, because that would seem to be the main issue.
Yeah.
Not only that, they had to build them so high, and with the water, the force of water there, it was a lot of danger.
Yeah.
But with the suspension bridge, in order to get the big cables across, they had to find a way to get it from one side to the other, and it just was not a practical way.
Yeah. Couldn't they swim across with it, could they?
No. And so this young engineer goes, well, what if we had a contest on flying a kite?
Yeah.
And the object was to fly a kite from one side of the river and have it come down on the other side.
He even paid for that. Didn't he have a contest?
Yeah, whoever got it across got $5.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking like, I believe it was 1920, so $5 was a big deal.
Yeah.
Be like $100 or $200 today. And so at the end of the kite string, he tied on a little bit bigger string, and they pulled that across. Then they tied on a little bit bigger string. Then they tied on a rope, dragged it across. Then they started tying on wire cable, pulling it across. And eventually, they got the biggest cables across
Yeah.
that they needed. Just from the start of a kite string. Remember I said earlier, don't try to go
All at one
Big.
time. Yeah.
in order to get the cable across.
You're not gonna be able to fly a cable across there with a kite.
No.
So you got to start somewhere. That's good. Good point.
They had to, and I wonder how many times it never. This book doesn't tell us how many times it took them to fly a kite across.
No,
Just said that they had
a winner. And don't know how many people was up there flying that kite. You know, and he eventually did build a railroad bridge across there.
Yep.
And people were still skeptical until he gets on there himself and drives across and shows them until they build that trust. Now, how does that relate to the church building bridges into our community?
Okay. Well, first of all, we were just talking about food bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is just speaking from experience. I don't have statistics, but in other areas of the country where I've been a pastor, an associate pastor at, they'd come and say, "Hey, can you help at the food bank?" One food bank said, "You know what? We're a parachurch organization. We're open on Sundays, but we don't have any way to we don't have anyone to pick up the bread from this grocery store." This is in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania. I was actually an intern at the church, and bring it to the mission.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, that's an easy comment. That's easy. I drive right by that grocery store, and
Yeah.
your mission's 3 blocks from the church. I'll pick it up. It's no big deal."
Yeah.
And they were shocked. All I had to do was once every other Sunday drive to the grocery store, pick up the crate of bread, take it to the mission.
Yeah. It's that simple, isn't it? That's a simple way of understanding that there's opportunities for us to get involved in the community if we're willing to connect with other places other than just our own local church.
You know what I ended up sacrificing?
What's that?
15 minutes of sleep on those Sundays.
Well, I believe you made it all right, didn't you? All right. Well, that's a story of the Niagara Falls bridge building story, and we just touched the surface on that. I mean,
Right.
It took years to do that. People were afraid. People ridiculed him. People had all these fears, and then even after it was built, they didn't want to go across until they seen somebody go across. And so, as a leader in the community, as a leader in your church, you know, you're going to face resistance. You're going to face fears and doubts, even of your own, when you begin to try to connect with other churches and other ministries in your community to make a difference. If your church isn't providing the ministry that challenges you and pulls out your talents and gifts and skills and passions, then don't leave your church. Look for a ministry to get involved with and be that extension in your church, in your community. All right, let's look here. All right, now as it stares across the great chasm, much of the church no longer believes it can influence the world. Now, just like those folks that's sitting on one side of the Niagara and watching them try to build this bridge, they didn't believe there's any way to make a bridge across that gorge. And we've got folks today who have either not tried to reach the community, they don't know how to reach the community, and they're afraid. They don't believe it can be done sometimes.
Well, here's a phrase.
Just a second. And a lot of this causes us to revert back to the mindset, well, Jesus is going to have to come save us all. The end's close. And, you know, I don't want to get into church philosophy and theology here, but he didn't tell us to back up and quit working and wait on him to come. He told us to have our lamps full, ready, so when he does come back, he finds us working, doing what he's called us to do. So we have to change our mindset. Now go ahead.
I don't remember which professor it was. I'm pretty sure it was one of my professors that told me this. We live in a world of impossibilities,
Yeah.
but we serve the God of all possibilities.
Yeah, that's good.
And so when we sit and look at this, there's a way to get across. Sometimes we limit our ability to hear from God.
Mm-hmm.
As a pastor, I'm guilty of that. And if you're a pastor listening and saying you're not, you can repent tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's a possible way to get it. We have to be willing to allow God. Now, sometimes that takes time.
Hmm.
And that's what humanity doesn't want to hear. Time.
It always takes time. Yeah.
But it's going to take, sometimes it takes time. But if you allow God to develop it, it'll be the right style.
Yeah.
It'll be the right message for the population He's put there.
Right. Well, we're already into an hour on the show, so we're going to kind of go through some of these topics that's in this
All right.
this chapter. Now he talks about some of the fallback methods that churches fall back to when they're struggling to get people to come to church. And the first thing is they try to learn to be culturally relevant. They change their music. They change different things that they do. They want to connect with people. And there's nothing wrong with being culturally relevant, but when we hang our job of ministering to the world on that, then it's going to fail. It does every time. Promise heaven now. Sometimes that's that right wing preaching of God's going to be Santa Claus to you. He's going to take care of everything, and your life is going to be great and wonderful. We're preaching the wrong message. Not that God doesn't take care of our needs, but when we tell people that's what the gospel's about, then they come in and things don't always work out the way that the promise was made. They kind of leave because they become discouraged. They've been given a false hope. And then the next one is just preach the word. Preach it hard, preach it strong, and they'll come. Just preach the word and people will show up. God will send them because you're preaching the word. It doesn't always work that way either. It doesn't keep them. And then some just say, stay the course, it'll work out. So all these fallback methods don't work. It's been proven that they don't.
And you know what's the problem with all these fallback methods?
What's that?
They're methods. They're not love.
Yeah.
You can preach the word in love and people will come. You can stay the course in love and be sustainable. But they've become methodology, and we've been focused on methodology.
Right.
We've negated the love. We can't move on.
It's methods versus relationships. It doesn't work.
Exactly.
So Jesus, Jesus had a dangerous dream,
Mm-hmm.
and he's passed that dream on to us. So we've talked about Roebling's Bridge. That was a dangerous dream that he had. He accomplished it. Jesus accomplished his dream. We're here to fulfill it and carry it on. All right. So let me ask you this.
Okay.
Do you believe that Jesus? Hang on a minute here. Let me frame this right.
Need some hammers and nails to frame it?
Yeah. Let's just move on. We got for sake of time. Let's move on here. I didn't really frame that question right myself. I can't answer it myself, so I'm gonna stick you with that one. All right. Let's just go down to some bridge builder questions.
All right.
At the end of each chapter, there's three or four questions that we need to ask ourselves and be objective when we answer them. Sometimes we get defensive. Well, our church is doing this and we're doing great things. Well, we probably all are doing something good. So we don't want to be subjective. We want to be completely objective and look at it from an outsider. What does an outsider see when they look on inside of our church?
These questions today come off of page 32 in the book, if you have the book and are following along.
Yeah.
So the first question is what kind of impact do you believe today's church is having on our culture? This is going to be different for every church.
Yeah.
Your church in our culture here in Greenbrier County has a lot bigger footprint than my church. My church might have like a little bit of a toenail where you guys have got like two massive footprints.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be the first church that everyone wants to call for everything and
Yeah.
seeking help. But here's the thing. That only describes the size of the footprint.
Yeah.
Doesn't describe the impact. So small church pastor, what are you trying to do to reach your neighbors?
Yeah. Who's God called you to and how are you ministering to them? If he's called you to 10, how are you ministering to the 10? If he's called you to 1,000, how are you ministering to the 1,000?
Last year my church, we kind of like took 50 houses and every 3 to 4 months, we would take them gifts and drop them off their doorstep. I got a letter the other day asking me how come we hadn't done that since last year, because they really enjoyed getting those gifts. So we hadn't seen any production of people coming to the church from it, so we kind of questioned whether it was right or wrong. Now we're starting to see, hey, we felt loved because of doing this. And now guess what? We're going to go back and do it because the purpose there is to love people.
And this is the thing we've got to ask ourselves and be human about it. Do we do it to get them to come to our church, to fill our pews, to fill our seats, to make us feel better? Or do we do it because we truly do love them? They may go to someone else's church. Would that be okay? We have to be okay with that, or we don't need to do it. So that's the thing about it. Sometimes our methodologies is what gets us in trouble. But when the motive is, we just want to love the people in our community, we begin to see fruit in different ways than what we expected. So that's a good point. Question number 2: how does the community around you know your church? What are you known for in your church? Is it are you known for having great services, or are you known for serving your community?
My church is known for having a great place to watch the planes take off.
There you go. You're right. You're right there next to the airport. And what tangible influence is your church having on your community? We have to ask ourselves that. Our footprint. What are we doing in our community? The doors open and we expect them to come, or are we out there on the ground, boots on the ground, doing things in our community to make a difference?
Tangible. For some of you might not know what tangible means. The word "tang" is a Greek word that means to feel.
Yeah.
So, how are people going to feel what you're trying to convey?
Right. All right. Well, it's time to close. We've kept you over about 5 minutes, but I hope you stayed with us through the show. I know some of you are working and didn't have the whole hour, but you can tune in and watch this later. We'll reshare it again later. So again, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week at same time,
11 o'clock.
11 to 12. And but I do challenge you, as you know, to answer those bridge building questions. If you don't have the book, get the book and read it. If it doesn't stir you into moving into the vision that Jesus has called us to work together, then man, there's something wrong. We really have to look inside of our heart and say, you know, Lord, refresh the vision in my heart. Tell me what you want me to do. So we also have a Thursday broadcast. Bill Kraft and I with Giant Slayer Consulting teach on the 21 laws of leadership. So we're on law number 6 coming up this week. And next week's lesson, just to touch on it a little bit, John, why don't you tell them just a little bit about what next week's lesson's about?
All right, so living proof. This is going to be your ability of what people actually see from you. We kind of led up to it. Now we're going to talk about this a little bit more heavier next week on, are you being a living proof for your church?
Yeah, so that's great. All right, so we'll talk about some challenges and views of the modern church, and another bridge building story, and an unorthodox bridge builder. This guy was pretty interesting, and we never thought he was a bridge builder, but he was a guy who could get the job done.
Yep.
And sometimes we think it's the pastor or the preacher who's going to get the job done. It's somebody inside that congregation.
If I'm not mistaken, he was only a part of the team. He wasn't even the engineer.
Yeah, that's it. So we're going to talk about some success stories and the direction that Jesus gave us. So again, thank you for tuning in. You guys have a great week. Go ahead and post your comments or questions on this thread if you want, and I'll definitely get back to you. But thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.
God bless.